All right, today we're jumping into a book that makes a really bold claim. It's called The 5,000-Year Leap by Cleon Skousen, and it argues that in just 200 years, the United States of America basically sparked a 5,000-year leap in human progress. So let's kick things off with a question that's right at the heart of this book's argument. What if the entire way we think about politics, left versus right, isn't how America's founders saw the world at all?
See, according to Skousen, the founders were operating on a completely different axis. They weren't thinking about political parties. They were thinking about political power. And it's a framework that the book argues we've pretty much totally forgotten about.
So where did they get this powerful idea? Well, the book traces its origins all the way back to a brutal, real-world experiment that went horribly, horribly wrong. It doesn't start with success. It starts with a story of absolute starvation.
So let's head back in time. We're talking the early 1600s with the Jamestown colony. It was supposed to be a business venture, all about finding gold. But instead, for 7 straight years, it was just an experiment and total failure.
I mean, the situation got so horrific, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. The book's foreword describes the colonists eating their horses, then their dogs, even the leather from their own shoes, and then, well, this. Out of 9,000 people who originally sailed to Virginia, only about 1,000 survived. So what on earth was going so wrong?
Well, the book points to one core problem: the system they set up. Jamestown was run on a communal model. The idea was everyone works for the common good, and you can take whatever you need from a shared storehouse. But with no direct reward for your own hard work, well, the result was laziness and neglect. People went off looking for gold instead of farming. The system was literally killing them. But then, in 1614, a guy named Sir Thomas Dale came along and just threw the whole model out.
And the change was, wow, immediate. Dale gave each man his own plot of land to own and farm for himself. All of a sudden, there was a powerful incentive to work. With their own survival on the line, the colonists got busy. And that very fall, the storehouse was full, and the colony was finally on a path to success. This, the book argues, was the foundational lesson: freedom and private property, just work.
So this small-scale lesson from Jamestown, well, according to the book, it would go on to inform a set of principles that unleashed an absolute explosion of human progress.
And that brings us to this number, 5,000. This is the big one, the one that gives the book its name. The argument goes like this: for 5,000 years, human progress was painfully slow. People pretty much used the same tools, lived the same kinds of lives, and died young. But in the 200 years after America's founding, humanity made a 5,000-year leap.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of that change. I mean, think about it for a second. Electricity, modern travel, global communications, doubling the average human lifespan. The book basically contends that the founders' principles of freedom and free enterprise economics created a culture that gave wings to the human spirit, not just in America, but all around the world.
So that brings us to the author's motivation. Why did Cleon Skousen even write this book? Well, he truly believed that this incredible formula for success, this blueprint for prosperity and freedom, was being forgotten.
In the preface, Skousen talks about being a law student during the Great Depression, and watching politicians try to solve problems with methods the founders would have absolutely forbidden. He felt that his generation had become, and these are his words, ideologically speaking, un-Americans. Not because they were bad people, but just out of pure ignorance of these core principles. So he set out to catalog them.
This quote just captures his whole viewpoint perfectly. He saw the nation as this ship that had lost its way, drifting really far from the initial moorings, the core ideas, that had made it so successful in the first place. This book is his attempt to draw a map back to shore.
Okay, now let's get to what is, for my money, maybe the most fascinating idea in the entire book: a completely different way to look at politics.
Our whole political vocabulary today is built around this one question. We try to categorize everything as either left-wing or right-wing. But the book argues this is a modern and, frankly, misleading invention.
So, the modern view, which came from how parties literally sat in European parliaments, puts ideologies like communism on the far left and fascism on the far right. But the book says the founders used a much more practical yardstick. How much power does the government have over the individual? And here's the kicker. From the founders' perspective, putting communism and fascism at opposite ends of a spectrum just makes zero sense. They are just different names for the same thing: total government control.
They aren't opposites, they're basically the same thing with a different paint job.
So here it is. This is the founder spectrum, as Skousen describes it. It runs from zero government control on one end, which is just anarchy, all the way to 100% government control on the other, which is tyranny, or what he calls ruler's law. The goal, the real sweet spot they were shooting for, was right there in the middle, a balanced center, where you have enough government to protect people's rights, but not enough to abuse them. And they called this people's law.
All right, let's dig a little deeper into the two extremes of this spectrum, because the book presents them as the two fundamental choices that any society has to make.
The way Skousen tells it, the entire American experiment was a conscious effort to escape that historical pendulum that always swung between chaos on one side and total oppression on the other. They wanted to create something new, something stable, right in that balanced center, governed by people's law. And this slide just lays out the two systems perfectly. On one side, under ruler's law, power is totally top-down. It's absolute. But on the other side, with people's law, power flows from the citizens up. It's really the fundamental difference between being a subject ruled by someone's whim and being a citizen protected by fixed laws. So in the end, the 5,000-year leap lays out 28 of these fundamental principles, everything from the importance of religion and morality to the separation of powers and free market economics that the book claims are the ingredients for that balanced center. This is what it calls the success formula.
And that leaves us with this. The book offers a framework that isn't about left versus right, but about freedom versus control. It asks us to look at any government, any policy, and ask ourselves, is this moving us toward anarchy, or is it moving us toward tyranny? Or is it helping us maintain that balanced center of people's law? It's a really different lens and a provocative question to think about.